Scott Francis and Greg Harley with BP3. A little bit about BP3 before we get to the content. We're a 50-person firm focused on BPM. Our 49th and 50th person just started on Monday, so we're pretty excited about that. We started 7 years ago with just 2 of us. A couple of Lombardi alums started BP3. And our goal is just to focus on BPM and make the experience simpler for customers, improve the experience for customers, and get a lot of value out of BPM. So I wanted to recap a little bit about what we did last year, or what we showed last year. We talked a lot about 3 interesting opportunities for mobile BPM: responsive UIs, hybrid apps, native apps. You've already actually seen a couple of examples of those here. And we were really focused at the time. Let's see if I can get this thing to, yeah. We were really focused at the time on hybrid apps as kind of where we wanted to go. And just within a couple of months, we kind of made a pivot, and we really focused on responsive UIs. And this relates a bit back to the title of the talk, but we'll get to that in just a minute. So why did we change, or why did we change our focus? Well, we looked at the challenges that we had with both native and hybrid apps. And a key challenge was the mobile team sort of gatekeepers. If you want to deploy mobile apps in most Fortune 500 customers, and our customer base is Fortune 50, Fortune 500 type customers, they've got a mobile team. The mobile team decides what gets deployed for mobile apps to their users. Not the users, not the BPM director, not the VP of the line of business, but the mobile team. And it's a bit like early 2000s if you wanted to integrate to SAP. Well, you didn't get to integrate to SAP. You had to go to the integration team. If you want to integrate to a database that was a homegrown database, you don't get to integrate to that database or system. You have to go to the integration team to get integration in. And what you find when you go talk to that team is they have a 5-year plan, you're not on it, and that causes a lot of delays when we're talking about BPM projects that are 3 months or less in duration. So we just got tired of the gatekeeping going on. And the second issue was that we had a lot of cases where BPM teams were lacking the skills to deploy mobile apps or write mobile apps. The cross-platform deployment plumbing just isn't commoditized. So different customers, you run into different ways of deployment. The customer themselves may not have it commoditized. And what I really mean about commoditized is that the person deploying the app doesn't really have to understand the plumbing for deploying it. When you put a website up, the people who deploy those websites and build the websites don't really have to understand how the company procures the hardware and deploys the app. They really just have to understand how to build the website. And for BPM apps, same thing. Also a variety of development tools, and we had a little bit of the problem that we were observing in the market of one app for everything. I go to one app and it has all the processes in my organization. We kind of already have that app, and it's called email. So with responsive UI approaches, HTML-based applications, what we were seeing was we could avoid the gatekeepers and get our software deployed. We'd have our experience over the last 18 months is that responsive UI frameworks have simply gotten a lot better. So it's easier to build a high-functioning UI without going a native app route. There's improved CSS media query support as well, and the cross-platform deployment plumbing is basically commoditized. It's a sort of transparent event for our customers to deploy HTML user interfaces to mobile apps or to their mobile devices. The other chart we showed last year that I thought was kind of interesting when I looked back at our presentation from last year was this one, which turned out to be way too conservative in terms of view of like what you might try to accomplish with HTML5 versus hybrid versus native. And the pressure is pushing basically all of this stuff toward the upper right-hand corner, I guess it is from your perspective. And that's something that while in the consumer space, there's still, I think native apps really provide you a much better adoption curve. We have to remember in the enterprise space, we're dealing with, the end users aren't really the deciders of how the apps get deployed. So while we might have to win over their buy-in on the applications, there's a decision maker that you have to get past to even get that buy-in, and that decision maker is an IT director or higher in the organization. So we had kind of an interesting result when we switched focus to responsive UIs. And one is that enterprise adoption got a lot easier. We stopped getting pushback about building mobile-ready UIs using HTML5 and our responsive UI toolkit. So we released what we call the Brazos UI toolkit. We announced it at IBM Impact last year. When we were here at bpmNEXT, we still hadn't given it a name and really put it out there. And with that Toolkit, we have one designer, one user interface. We can deploy across any platform. Or any modern platform anyway. You can even deploy to IE8, although we don't necessarily recommend that. We can get it to mobile devices, whether it's iOS or Android or Windows Phone, even certain versions of BlackBerry. And all the BPM UIs are basically mobile ready if you build them with the Brazos toolkit. But we had an additional requirement, which is that the UIs we build had to actually look better on the desktop or laptop than the out-of-the-box user interface that was shipping with IBM BPM at the time. And in 2014, basically, we're seeing sort of real feedback from users. The feedback you're seeing on the screen are quotes I took from, admittedly cherry-picked, from our support site. So those are people who are reporting, generally speaking, problems or questions to our support site, and then getting an answer, and then these are the kinds of responses we're getting. Hasn't changed my life for the better. That's a little concerning about this person's sort of perspective, but we always like to hear that BP3 and Brazos rock, right? So that's always a good thing. And a kind of interesting decision we made along the way is that this is the toolkit and the UI that we always wanted to build for our customers. So we didn't want them to decide not to build with it. And so we're giving it away for free, not just to our customers, but to anyone sort of in the IBM BPM community that wants to use it, can use it. So we make it free to partners, we make it free to customers, we make it free to competitors. And I think that's been a sort of really interesting thing for the adoption of Brazos. So if you go back to June when we released it, we had about a dozen people registered as developers with Brazos. And we had 6 live deployments of Brazos. And I'm defining production deployments the way customers define them. So you can, cross-hash how you count processes in a deployment. But when the customer has a major project and it goes live, whether it's 1 process or 10 processes, it's 1 deployment. And that's how we're counting in this situation. By November, we had over 200 registered users, and we had crossed up to, I think, 12 live deployments. And now we're looking at nearly 400 registered developers with Brazos and 20 live deployments. And an interesting thing about the registered user count is that really only 1 person needs to register for an entire company, let alone team. So we think we're really underrepresenting the number of people who are using Brazos based on the support tickets we get and the activity we're getting with the toolkit. So there are also some fun things about using it is it gives us a chance to really invest in things that we care about. We've had some major wins in the Fortune 50. We've had some interesting competitive wins. We think we've kind of cracked the code for adoption within this ecosystem. And we're able to kind of turn around and invest in a UI toolkit that really will benefit all of our current customers, but also our future projects. So they get a free toolkit that's fully supported by BP3, and we get to do things like add accessibility or ADA support to it, to varying standards, right? There's WCAG and ADA. We also can do things like add new components, like the scalable tables that just were released, or collaboration support, which is sort of a key feature within the IBM product. So enough talking. Well, we'll keep talking, but we'll also show. This is an example, a wind farm site investigation. In Texas, we have a lot of wind, and we have a lot of wind farms. It seems like sort of odd that we're an oil state, but we also like green energy. So there's a whole lot of investment in wind energy. And we're going to show just a couple steps out of this process, a request and a site investigation. And I'll let Greg drive that part to show off Brazos. Sorry.
Yep. Thanks, Scott. Yeah, so Scott's talked a lot about Brazos. Let's have a bit of a look at it. Basically, what we're going to show is a very simple portal that we've come up with. The reason for this is to simply just act as a container for tasks. It's not a production sort of thing. It's something we threw together very quickly. But the whole idea is to encapsulate the coaches, the forms that are generated through Brazos and working with the BPM engine. So let me log in real quick, because I was logged in, but I got logged out.
It's that break between AV setup and actual demo.
And helps if I get the... Yeah. There we go. All right, so cutting to the chase, I've already got a process deployed This is the process that we just talked about. This is a different view. It's exactly the same process. It's the wind farm process. What I'm going to do right now, first off, is to simply run through a couple of these screens just to sort of show you the different sort of views of Brazos and what it comes up with. So let's run up the process, execute the first task. Very simple form, all right? It takes a site name, the site owner, and whether we need to do a feasibility study, which was one of the branches in that process. So let's, for a start, a site name, one of my favorite, Snake River Canyon, if I can spell it right, and site manager, I see my friend John Reynolds up there from IBM, so John's my helps if I can type. You do deserve the capital, John, but and I do not want to go through the feasibility study, mainly because I don't have forms set up for that particular task, so it would come up with a blank. So I'll submit that, and here I have the next task through the BPM engine, and we'll bring it up, and here we see the what you had seen before. This is Brazos in all its glory. All right, so that we had a simple form to start with, and now we have a much more complex form. We have collapsible panels. All right, that's very nice. We have type ahead function, take location. It could be, I know it's not in Germany, but we have type ahead function, goes back through a service. Okay, so the form calls a service, comes back with a list, JSON list, and generates your type ahead. In this case, it's USA. We have expanders all over the place. Here we see John Reynolds and Snake River Canyon. And we have tables, the ability to add or extra tables to the and equipment to the system. And so we'll end up with more and more information in a very complex form. Now, so what? Everyone's seen this in a browser, but this was about mobile, right? And this is about a responsive UI and adaptive UI. So if I bring up my simulator, mobile simulator, I have the same form in an iPhone. We see that, and I'm going to try to put this side by side, we see that the UI has been reformatted to fit inside the mobile device. You still have all of the same features. We've still got all our collapsible panels. We still have our type ahead. Whoops, I collapsed it. And we still have all our type ahead. So all of the features that we previously had are there, but it's now in a format that works on a mobile device. Now, if we were to rotate this thing, hardware rotation, rotate left, just as is the case with any other mobile app, the form again resizes itself, reformats itself to become, adaptable and fits the screen size that we're looking at. So that's the first thing, and obviously my mobile emulator lost the cool frame around it, but blame Apple for that. All right, so how'd we get here? One thing I'd like to do, and one thing we saw earlier was the basic portal, and one of the reasons we built the basic portal is to show us how we can get there. All right, so let's start off with build out a basic form. We've got a set of components. They'll build our form name, which would be, let's set the form name to open a project or start a new project. Okay. We obviously need a text input. That input's going to have the label of the site name. And I'm just going to give it a little better ID so I can recognize it later. And of course, that's going to be required. Save that. So we now have a site name. Let's put a placeholder in there. No, that's fine. Who cares? We also want to have the owner. So same sort of thing. Set up the site owner. Dang.
Get the old back button.
I got the whole back button thing happening.
Basic idea though is you can basically drag and drop to build your UI on the fly.
Yeah.
Get a sense for what it looks like, and then deploy it. And the sort of interesting thing about what he's showing here is, although we built the wind farm demo initially on IBM BPM, the screens that we've shown running here and the form builder he's using here are actually running against activity BPM.
Yeah.
So we thought kind of an interesting exercise that we've been thinking about ever since we wrote the original version of Brazos is, could we support an open source BPM product? And we thought, well, why not, right? Why not give it a go? And we found that basically all of the design patterns and the sort of interesting aspects of building the Brazos UI toolkit ported over pretty nicely.
Yeah. In fact, the wind farm UI that we have started off as this page actually started off as a IBM BPM coach. Mm-hmm. They refer to them there. And the technology built into Brazos allows us to take what was built there and in a matter of, I'm not going to say minutes, it took about an hour, hour and a half, but in a matter of an hour and a half, we made this available and completely operational in the activity platform. And we could do this with pretty much any BPM solution that uses a REST API, that can be driven with a REST API. We could put these forms on top of, you name it, BPM engine that can be driven with REST. And so the
attraction to us, obviously, as a services provider is we work with more than one product. Although our heritage is Lombardi and we do the majority of our work on IBM BPM, we also work with some other products for our customers, and we want to carry some of the good ideas we have from one platform to another, but we've also learned from the open source community and applied those ideas to the Brazos UI toolkit. Our first thought, even on the IBM ecosystem, was not to give it away, it was to sell it, right? And our experience of working with some of the guys at Activity and some of the other folks in the open source community kind of opened our eyes to the idea that, actually it might be the best thing to do to give it away. And that we might be actually able to create more value for the ecosystem, whether or not that translates directly to more value for BP3. Our goal is to get more interesting BPM out there, and I think that rising tide will, sort of lift the boats, and hopefully we'll be right there among them.
Yeah.
So I think there's really a lot of value. Yeah, let's go back to the last slide.
So
I think there's really a lot of value for consulting firms to have tools that they can use that make sense across a number of different products, whether those products are Android and iOS products or those products are different operating systems or BPM engines. We'll see another talk later about BPMN interchange. And I think this sort of dovetails at different layers of the stack. Do I want my data to transport? Do I want my UIs to transport? Or do I want my tools to allow me to use similar notions across different products? So,
I think the last thing about this is that we've already got this running in the cloud. The sandbox version, the code, the actual UI designer, while that was provided simple UI design, multi-columns and panels, those sorts of things, should be available pretty quickly. We're very close to having that capability in the form builder, and you can play with it yourselves. We have a URL. You can register and go play.
Yeah, and we'll give you, if you register, then we'll get you a login and get you set up so you can get into the sandbox. So for us going forward, we're just going to keep focusing on responsive mobile solutions for BPM UIs. The state of the art for responsive UI keeps changing and improving, so I think that's where our focus is going to be in terms of user interface technology for the near future. And we're really going to double down on our investment in Brazos, both for IBM BPM and for open source platforms. And the UI builder, I think, really right now only makes sense for open source because IBM actually provides a really good UI builder. But the other components, I think, make sense either way. So,
yeah.
Anyway, questions?